Okay, guys, so we are going to do a response video to Inkiri Elite Fitness. And he had a video here called Why You Need to Stop Doing Cheat Rows, Rubish Rows specifically. So let's kind of go through this and see what he says. Got to move myself here so we can. There we go. Let's see what he's got for us.
What's up, guys? Alec here, and today we're gonna ruffle some feathers. Well, I guess that we're gonna ruffle some more feathers because we've already ruffled a whole bunch of them these last couple weeks, talking about why I don't like bodybuilding and why I don't like powerlifting. So
I promise I won't get that butt hurt. I'm not on trend. I'm not going to get that mad. Let's see what he says here.
So many feathers and so little time. Today we're going to talk about cheat rows, though. Cheat rows, you guys have all seen them. Many of you are going to be proponents of them. And today I'm going to argue that they are a waste of your training time. Collective gasp.
Well, cheat rows aren't entirely a waste of training time. Am I as big on them as I used to be? No. And truthfully, a cheat row, the way I did them, was more of like a hybrid row deadlift. So it's a very loose phrasing is calling them a cheat row because it's literally like deadlift the bar and then try to just yank it up into your stomach as fast as possible. And it was just one of those things for fun, like when you're on cycle and stuff, and you're literally hitting crazy numbers. You just want to do stuff for fun. So 600-pound cheat rows and it's like the 405-pound Bulgarian split squats I did. Those were pretty. Let's see if I can pull them up. Actually, those were tough as well. But let's see. Let's get it, guys. Let's see if I can find them here. Yeah. So this is the same kind of thing. Would I recommend going this heavy? Absolutely not. I would not recommend going this heavy. But it was one of those fun, strength tests. So this is 405 pounds, which I think Bugenhagen's the only one who's gone heavier. But this kind of thing, just like the cheat rows, maybe not the best idea, as you can see how it ends here. Just one of those fun things to try. And you're going to see here, I tear my adductor. So I have to throw the bar over my head. Look at that. Adductor popped through the bar over my head. So fun times. But like I said, it's something you sometimes want to do for fun. Going that heavy.
I know. Let's break it down and I'll make my argument and then you guys can decide for yourselves how you feel about them. All right, so the cheat row. These have been nicknamed Rubish rows, named after Pete Rubish, who's a freak of nature. He's deadlifted over 900 pounds in the gym. In more recent history, Kyler Woolham has become...
Okay, so first of all, very nice, kind words. I appreciate that. Nice guy here. I'm not insulted at all. Very nice guy.
I'm a proponent of them as well. I believe George Lenin has also advocated for this style, or at least a similar style of cheat rowing in the past. And another notable proponent of lots of body English cheat style rowing is Big Ronnie Coleman. Though I do wonder if he's had a change of heart regarding movements like that in recent years, just given how things have been going for him in particular. But so what do all of these guys have in common? Well, for starters, they all have or had absolutely massive deadlifts, right? Secondly, they were also all on PEDs, perhaps copious amounts of them. So what could that mean? We'll get to that a little bit more.
Well, nowadays I could have claimed that was natural, but I would not do that.
Later on in the video. What I want to focus on today, mostly though, I want to focus primarily on Rubish and Woolham, as those are the two guys who, at least in recent years, have really popularized this movement the most, especially in the sense of using it kind of as assistance work, as accessory work for the deadlift too, but as a means of actually building a stronger deadlift. And so just the concept of barbell rows where you absolutely go ham in terms of body English and using that as an accessory move for building the deadlift. Popularize. So that's kind of the context, that's kind of the lens that we're going to be looking at this movement through in today's video. And so let's just watch these guys do these rows real quick.
Now, if you notice, this is a squat bar. It's a 55-pound bar, and there's five. I think this was 6 plates each side. That's why there's no bend, because it is a squat bar. So this was 605 pounds for 5. This was the heaviest I've ever gone. I think that was the video. I know there's a video I do 600 for 5.
Now let's watch it again, but this time in slow motion. And let's see what we can see. So in both cases here, the lifter stood up almost completely with the weight. Before they heaved it up, their body, their torso was almost perfectly erect. So essentially, they've actually just performed an aggressive sub-maximal deadlift. Now, yes, they are heaving that weight around because they're both 900-pound deadlifters. And this is only about 500 pounds.
This is true. This is kind of like I said. It's like a hybrid between a deadlift and a row. To call it a row is kind of an abomination of the movement. But, I had fun with it. It was just one of those things that really tested your explosiveness.
Which is relatively light for them. So the question is, are they 900-pound deadlifters because they built a 500-pound cheat row? Or can they cheat row 500 pounds because they're 900-pound deadlifters? I'm going to go with the latter here, because the reality is, if we look at this movement, if we break it down,
he's correct as far as that goes. Like, the reason the 600-pound rows are possible is because the deadlift was so high, the deadlift strength, not vice versa. It's not like these built me up to a 900-pound deadlift. So that part is correct. I can't argue with that.
They essentially just pretty much deadlifted this weight. They stood up almost completely with the bar, and then when they bend forward again at the waist, they're just doing that essentially to approximate a finished rowing position. But when they do that, the difference in bar displacement from when they were almost completely upright versus when they rebend at the waist, it's actually pretty minimal. And in reality, the difference, that extra displacement, is actually basically only a consequence of the momentum that had already been imparted on the bar by the posterior chain prior to them bending forward again at the waist. So it's almost like a really brute force, low pull type of lift. So what can we say about all this? Well, for starters, you need to understand that you aren't these guys. These guys are fucking freaks of nature, man. And that's not to say that maybe you won't be the next freak of nature, but I'm going to argue...
Maybe not anymore, but trend definitely helped.
That these guys would have all actually gotten to the same place in the end, the same place that they are now, even if they'd never done a cheat row in their life, because it's pretty clear.
That's very probable.
By watching the mechanics of what is going on here, that for one, they aren't gaining the benefits of rowing from doing this really at all. They are gaining the benefits of performing an explosive sub-maximal deadlift, but in the process, they're also probably creating undue stress on the lower back by kind of humping the air to reach the barbell again and make the movement look more like a row. Okay, fine. So with that...
Now, one thing I would say, though, the actual danger of these to the low back is minimal because we're not controlling the eccentric. If you were really trying to control the eccentric in that rounded position, it would be much more dangerous on the low back. But the fact that it's purely a concentric lift makes it a lot safer. So that's one point as far as that goes.
What would I suggest then? In my opinion, you would get all the benefits that these guys are getting here simply by performing sub-maximal deadlifts with a focus on maximal acceleration and maximal bar speed, or even like speed pulls in the same sense that they've been advocated by Louis Simmons and his conjugate style training from Westside Barbell.
This is true to some degree because the purpose of programming these at all anymore would be for someone who is weaker off the floor and is not an explosive lifter. So if I was simply trying to target someone's low back and make them more explosive off the floor, these could have merit to some degree. Maybe not to the extent of what you see me doing with the 600-pound rows, but at a more sub-maximal level, a cheat row, not to the degree of cheating I was doing, I know I was getting absurd at that point, can have merit if we're trying to make someone more explosive and increase low back strength. Otherwise, I do not program them as much as I used to. I'm not as big of a proponent of them. So typically I will start a lifter with Pendlay rows that are fairly strict And then as the weight gets heavier, we will start to add some cheat in, but definitely not to the degree of what I used to do. So for the most part, I agree with him. Like I'm pretty much in agreement with most of this.
Maybe even with accommodating resistance, such as bands, that would force you to generate that same level of power and momentum in the lockout position to overcome the accommodating resistance. The same kind of concept that these guys are doing here by performing this cheat row, that extra little oomph at the end of the movement. The difference would be that you wouldn't be creating this undue jarring effect on the lower back by deliberately creating this sort of ballistic force against the bar in order to get your torso back into the rowing position at the end of the movement, the supposed end of the rep. As well, you would also actually get the benefits of practicing the specific deadlift movement pattern with submaximal weight. So you could focus with that, you could focus on really buttoning up little details on your deadlift, really honing and perfecting every aspect of your deadlifting form, while still having that permission to pull balls to the wall with maximal aggression, maximal power, maximal speed. Further, I would then recommend adding in strict rowing movements to complement this work.
Well, if you're really going to focus on strict rowing movements, the king of them all are seal rows. So barbell seal rows are the king. And then I also like just strict variations of pull downs, cable rows, T-bar chest supported rows, things like that. If you're trying to target the upper back, I never used these to target the upper back. They were a low back movement. With low back injuries, it's more so a matter of, volume over time. It's one of those things like if you lift heavy weight, deadlift even, and you don't do cheat rows at all for 10, 15 years, you're going to have back pain at some point. Same with squat. It's just a cumulative effect over the years, not necessarily performing lifts in a rounded fashion. You could perform completely neutral spine deadlifts and squats with perfect form for a decade, and you would still likely run into back pain at some point in time. So it's almost like a car. When the car has 200,000 miles on it, it's just not going to perform as well, as opposed to, having some rounding, because rounding is what makes you faster to some degree off the floor on deadlifts. It's a trade-off.
Preferably chest-supported rowing varieties, such as seal rows.
Oh, well, there you go.
Machine variations of chest-supported rows. So
for upper back work,
you're able to ensure that it isn't body English that's allowing you to row the weight, but that rather that you are actually rowing the weight via contraction and engagement of the muscles that.
So, I mean, like I said, I didn't use this as an upper back movement. That's ridiculous. But for low back movement, sure, has some merit.
Before I close, I alluded to PEDs at the beginning of this video, and I truly think that plays a role as well, a role in the people who see success with this sort of a process. All these guys are massive deadlifters, right? And they have the assistance of drugs to help nudge their progress along. Heavy deadlifting is notoriously draining on the body to the point where you can actually see pretty large fluctuations in deadlifting strength in very short periods of time if you're not programming things properly. And then the stronger that you get.
This is true. Deadlift is the most taxing lift on the CNS. So whereas I can bench all the freaking time and recover, deadlift is one of those lifts that I have to limit the frequency because it's so taxing on the CNS and even on my body in general. So he's correct about that.
At the movement, the more important that concept becomes, and the greater those potential fluctuations could be. These cheat rows allow these guys who have massive deadlifts to still push things to what they perceive to be the limit in that training session, but then it allows them to do this without incurring that massive systemic drain that just seems to occur as a consequence of frequent heavy deadlifting. So in some ways, the cheat row, it actually probably ends up being a break for their bodies kind of in totality when you look at the whole picture, which allows them to keep their training volume up and then have their heavy deadlift sessions end up being more productive. But again, I still think that
the cheat row is mainly programmed in after heavy deadlifts. So it's almost like a back down set of deadlifts to a degree. That's the only time I really program it in. And not much volume. Typically it'll only be like one set. It's kind of a deadlift hybrid assistance movement if I were to program it.
And as a consequence, definitely most of us would still be able to get at a minimum the same results, but probably actually better results by focusing on stricter rowing movements and then just using those submaximal deadlifts that I was talking about earlier with the focus on perfect form and high acceleration of the bar against accommodating resistance. And those big guys, those cheat rowers, they could probably even use more weight this way on a submax deadlift as compared to a cheat row without incurring any additional fatigue. And then for you, as a non-enhanced athlete, this concept is actually going to become even more important because recovery from jarring movements like this becomes less of a certainty without the use of exogenous hormones, especially the older that you get. And then,
again, I would just say the thing that plays a greater role in recovery is the mileage on the vehicle. So if you're someone who's relatively new to lifting in your younger 20s or whatever, whether you're natural or not, your recovery ability is going to be much higher than someone who has a ton of mileage on their body and can't train as frequently. So I would say that plays a much bigger role in recovery than whether you're natural or not. So the argument there, I'm not a big fan of, but overall, I pretty much agree with his video, and I think he's got a lot of fair points. Now, if you guys like this video that I'm doing, I'll keep doing stuff like this. Like and subscribe. It really helps the channel's growth. So I appreciate that. And thank you for watching.